All right, thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Bergantino, the director of the Wyoming State Climate Office and the Water Resources Data System. Glad you could join us on what is turning into a fairly snowy day in here in Laramie. The webinar here is presented by my office, along with the U.S. Geological Survey, the National Weather Service, and USDA Northern Plains Climate Hub and the University of Wyoming Extension. And we'll be looking today at current drought and climate conditions, surface water conditions, outlooks, weather forecasts, etc. And then we'll have a little bit on how you can get involved, as we usually do. So let's start off looking at current conditions, and we'll begin with the current drought monitor map. This came out this morning and reflects the status of things through Tuesday the 15th. These areas in red are showing deterioration since our last webinar, and areas in green are the improvements. Recent snows in the west have helped things out, and we've had a continued lack of precipitation around the east and southeast, which has led to these degradations over here. We'll stick with the overall view of drought this time, and we'll go into the percentage of Wyoming in each drought category from 2000 to present. 2000 is the start of the U.S. Drought Monitor, so we've got almost 23 years now of being able to take a look at these plots that show the level of each type of category in the state and the percentages of them. We've had some part of Wyoming now in D3 or extreme drought for the last 122 weeks now. This little, or turning into a fairly lengthy period of red down here. 56.81%, the area of the state in D1 to D4, that's true drought conditions. D0 is just that abnormally dry. But the D1 to D4 has increased by almost 4.5% since the last webinar. And then, as always, given the size of Wyoming, what you're seeing on here may not exactly be totally representative of what you're seeing in your area. So if you look at the link we have down here on the lower left, you can pull up these types of graphs for every county in the state. And we'll just zoom in on the last little bit here, from which covers mostly the recent drought. This goes back to the start of 2020. Almost 6.5% of the state in extreme drought now, and this is up from our webinar that we had at the end of October when the percentage was just a little over 3.5%. I think it was 3.54% then. So we are increasing the D3 level, and that's mostly over in the eastern part of the state, as you'd expect. The amount of the state with no D category, no D0 through D4 at all, is 18.41%, which good news there is that's the largest percentage that we've had of no D category in the state since the 14th of July in 2020, just after we started moving into this current drought schedule. This is the 14-day total precipitation statewide. We're looking at it as a percentile, and as you can see, at least in the last 2 weeks, quite a bit of the state is green, blues, and even some of those purples in there indicating above the median precipitation, which is always good to see. We got a little bit there in the southeast in the last 2 weeks, Albany, Platte County, a little into Goshen, and some into Laramie and over into Carbon, where we've got a little bit below median, not as bad as it could be. We're still up in the 20 to 30 percentile, which is a bit of improvement from what we were at, but that's only a 2-week period. And to emphasize that point, looking at the 90-day period, far northwest, central Wyoming, going down into Sweetwater, up into the Powder, Bighorn, we're seeing above median, or those greens, blues, purples. But then in the green, and then well over into the east and southeast, we're seeing these fairly dark reds in the 5-10 percentile and even lower. So just showing the longer term deficit of precipitation, which is also why we're seeing some of that extreme drought showing up on the drought monitor map. This is the standardized precipitation index, or the SPI, as I've explained before. But if you're new, it's another way of looking at precipitation. It allows you to compare conditions across regions having different precip regimes by calculating what your current precipitation amount is, whether that's for a month or 2 months or a year or even more, and then determining the number of standard deviations that is from what you would normally see, You can create an index value. So that's what you're seeing on these maps is an index, not an actual precipitation amount. And that index goes from a little below -2 usually on the dry side, those reds, to up over +2 on the wet side. And that's the blues that we're seeing up on the map. And these maps show the 30, 60-day timeframes on the top and 1 year down on the bottom right. And we're seeing continuing areas of concern in the 30 days in much of the eastern and southeastern areas, going back all the way to the yearly depiction down there in the lower right. On the western half, you can see the emerging wetter conditions, especially starting in the 60-day, but becoming much more apparent and widespread in the last month, thanks to some of those snows that we've gotten in the western part of the state. Take a look at 14-day average minimum temperature. A lot of blue and purple on that map, as you would expect, given the way things have been. Few little isolated pockets down here above average, but hardly worth mentioning. The lighter greens, 0 to 3 degrees below average. But then you see the darker greens here along the south, indicating about 3 to 6 degrees below average. And then as you move into the northern portions, these blues looking at 6 to 9 degrees below average. And then the Bighorn Basin here, where you're looking down as much as 12 degrees below the below average. And in the coming days, preview of coming attractions, expect a bit more blue on that map probably. Up here on the upper left, nighttime lows dropping below freezing statewide. And most of those are less than 20 degrees for minimum temperatures over the last 2 weeks. Moving over on to the maximum side of the thermometer, lower elevations still freezing, still above freezing. You see the southeast there, the red in Platte, Goshen, and Laramie counties, where we're in the mid-40s. But then you get into the western part and the higher elevations, bighorns, wind, and we're seeing daytime temperatures below freezing. And then looking down on the lower left here, the departure from normal for the maximum temperature. A little bit of area here in far eastern Sweetwater, Carbon, Albany, Laramie counties, where we're about 3 to 6 degrees below average, a little bit of 0 to 3 here along the Laramie River. But a lot of blue and a lot of purple on that map as well, indicating that most of the rest of the state has had high temperatures that were in the neighborhood of 6 to 12 degrees below average over the last 2 weeks. And here we have soil moisture comparing to 2 weeks ago. In a nutshell, we've had improvements in the west thanks to the snows that fell and were able to infiltrate some before soil started freezing there. In the east, though, we've got expanded and continuing deterioration as we got large area there, less than the second percentile in terms of soil moisture. And while we're on soils and frost, here's temperatures at various depths at some of the stations from the Upper Missouri River Basin project, as well as some of the stations that the state engineers office has around the state. This is as of 7 o'clock this morning, and you can probably maybe read the first poker chip on the discs, and most of those are below freezing. And what this is showing is just at the various depths from 2, 4, 8, 20, and 40 inches down, what the temperature is at each of those levels. And as you'd expect, as you get deeper down, they're warmer, but surface and down a little ways, we're getting frozen. And this is showing the actual depth. Again, this is 7 o'clock this morning, and some places soils are seeing temperatures as much as 11 degrees below, or sorry, depths of 11 inches where we're frozen down to. Little under 9, little these ones here with 0 we're not thawed, or we're not frozen yet, but quite a bit of area there where we've got frost now coming up. I'll just break up the monotony of the charts and maps. Here's what a view looked like from our station up in Cowley near the Montana border yesterday at 1:15 in the afternoon, showing a nice covering of snow there. And again, we're still early in the snow season, and there have been some losses, especially in the Green River Basin compared to 2 weeks ago as far as snowpack, but some good gains up here in the especially in the Bighorn, Powder Tongue, and over to the border for snowpack, at least in the plains. The southeast, again, you'll see is red on both of those maps, so nothing really accumulating there yet. But the way it's looking today, we should see some improvements on this map, at least for the short term here, given what we're seeing outside my window right now. And looking at snowpack by just as a basin, the previous maps were showing it as more of a modeled over the entire state, but this is just showing it by basin, showing the building snowpack in the Wind River Basin, up there around almost about 107 or so. You see the Upper Bear still has the asterisk on it. So expect here in the next little bit that those numbers will sort of solidify a bit so that we can take that off there, and we'll have values that are more representative conditions in that basin. But looking not too bad around, Bighorn 88%, rest of the state within 90 or so, except, as you've heard several times now, the southeast there where we're seeing those much lower percentages. Take a look at the building of the snowpack. This is the Wind River Basin. The current year is this black line. We're sort of circled in red here, which is kind of a nexus between median last year and the current. So we're right about on track right now for the Wind River Basin, at least. And these charts are updated daily and are available at the URL down here on the lower left part of the slide. We have them for all 22 basins that we're calculating for. Looking at the volume, this was something I showed last month, showing the total water volume of snow. This is the Snake River Basin, showing at all elevations. Dark line here again being the 2020 or water year 2023. The blue being the max, the red being the minimum, and the green being the median. And that slightly barely visible grayish green line is the average also plotted on there. And like the previous charts, these are updated daily and also can be found at this link down here in the lower left part of the slide. And one more just to look at these by elevation. These are a bit more specific and show the volume that each elevation slice is contributing. Only showing 3 here for the upper green, but each basin is broken into 9 elevation slices, and we're creating charts for each of these slices each day. Again, this is the upper green and shows the main contributing elevations. Important to note down there, and especially highlighted there in yellow, is that these are the raw numbers and don't necessarily represent what's going to happen or what's going to get to the gauge. There's a lot that can happen in between what you're seeing building up in terms of snowpack versus what actually makes it down into the river and can be measured at the gauge. So speaking of stream gauges, our next presenter is Aaron Fiaschetti with USGS, who will now discuss surface water conditions. Aaron?
Thanks, Tony. So here we are, middle of November. As you can see, winter's shown up recently, and we have a lot of stations that have ice. And when we have a ice effect, that would be the gray, the measurement flag that is prevalent throughout this real-time map from the National Water Information dashboard. We're unable to produce accurate real-time data because ice disrupts our relationship between stage and discharge. So those stations will be worked up on a kind of an ad hoc basis and estimated for winter record. But right now, especially if you might have noticed if you've visited a USGS stream gauge page that the NWIS has quite a different feel. So if you do interact with gauges, or you have, you'll see something quite different than what you're used to. So don't be surprised. So right now this is showing the green is a percentile flow, the 25th to 75th percentile. That's what they're considering a normal flow. The darker red is a much below normal, below the 10th percentile. There's a little bit of orange on there that means below normal, the 10 to the 25th. And for a change here, there's a black with a couple black dots, which are all-time highs for the day. But this generally November is not a time of great water supply. So these two sites showing all-time highs are less than 6 CFS. So one is Tantalus Creek up in the park, and the other one is Pacific Creek near Farson. So two pretty small streams showing a high flow for the day, which is a change from what I normally have to say. But so, the things still look pretty good in the Northwest. Things, look a little bit better in the Southwest. But it seems like that green down there is kind of showing things are improving. And if you kind of surf around the sites that are showing flow data that aren't affected by ice, they're pretty close to the median. So everything looks pretty good. And it seems like conditions have improved, with the caveat that, it's a time of not a lot of water, and the discrepancy between a really high and a really low flow at this time of year isn't quite as big as it would be, say, in the springtime. So just kind of moving on to surf around the state here. Up here in the Bighorn Basin, the Bighorn River at Basin, Wyoming. Things here in the fall have just been kind of chugging along pretty well, close to the median. This is a pretty highly managed system, but right now things look like the water movement downstream looks pretty close to what it normally should be. So things look pretty good, and probably, as you'll see, look forward into November, December, things will probably decrease a little bit as we kind of slide more into the depths of winter, and there's less inflow from any sort of runoff with cold temperatures. So moving over to the Tongue River Basin, the Goose Creek near Acme. It seems like if you look there in September and October, there's a bit of runoff coming off from fall storms or snow up in the Bighorns, and then things dropped off pretty good here through the month of October, and it's seen a little bit of an increase right around early November, and then starting to drop back off again. So things are starting to decrease, but looking back at this site, the flows tended to be well below the median for most of the year, except right at the peak of runoff in June. Moving over to the North Platte here at the state line, since management changed here, likely in end of September, flows have been much below normal, below the 25th percentile. And then as we kind of get into November, things are kind of getting closer to that 10th percentile. So things are getting pretty low there as we kind of slide into the middle of November and on. Moving over to the Green River below Fontenelle Reservoir. Things have been really steady over there for the last couple months. See here into November, there's probably some management changes that the flows have decreased a little bit. They're below the median right now, but things look pretty consistent for being near the median. So we'll see how things kind of continue to change there over the winter months. And then moving over to the Snake Basin, there's been seeing some pretty low stream flows over in the Snake, as well as low reservoir conditions. And here, this is the Snake River below Flat Creek near Jackson. And just kind of looking at September, end of September into October, the things really dropped down considerably on that river, and they've been hovering near the 10th percentile for the whole month of October, and then have kind of taken a dip here into November. Not sure if that'll change much with operations, but probably based on the way the distribution on the hydrograph from October to December, that things will probably decrease as they historically would over there, but time will tell there. So things on the Snake have been pretty low as of lately. And then just kind of a recap of reservoirs here in November. October, November, typically not a lot of extra water in the system for storage. Throughout the state, really, the contents, there's been some very minor changes, plus or minus a percent or two in change in content. So very little has been going on with storage right now, as would be expected, unless there is going to be some sort of a change in management. But there not a lot of water to store, and not probably a lot of reason to release water right now. So that's all I have. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Aaron. Moving into forecasts and outlooks, we have Tony Anderson with National Weather Service over in Cheyenne, who will talk about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tony Anderson, as Tony said, and thank you, Tony. I'm the service hydrologist at the Cheyenne office of the National Weather Service. And the first slide we're going to look at is our 7-day precip looking forward. And there's not a whole lot. It's November, and unless we're getting a big snowstorm, we don't really expect much. So we're not expecting a lot of snow over the next 7 days. Mostly it's going to be today into tomorrow as this system with the low front moves through. It will be accompanied by cold temperatures. And so in terms of snow, you're going to be looking at increased snow depth because of the temperatures, but probably decreased snow water equivalents. It's going to be light and fluffy, so good for shoveling, bad for reducing drought. And let's see, the next chance of rain is in the next 7 days is probably middle of next week. So go ahead. In talking about the cold, we put this slide together. This is the percent chance that you're going to drop below zero over in the Thursday to Friday time frame. You can see it is significant chances of cold across the state, but I guess welcome to winter. The north and east are going to be more so. You can see the 100% chance of hitting below zero in Lusk, 90% in Gillette, 98% in Sheridan. It's a little bit lower down the southwest in Evanston and in Rock Springs and over to Cheyenne. So north to south, it's colder in the north. Not a great shock there. Can you go ahead? Okay, looking into the outlooks, this is the 6 to 10 day temperature and precipitation outlook. The bulk of the cold air that we may see over the next 6 to 10 days is going to be in the next day or two. After that, it's a short-term cold. We should return to more moderate temperatures in the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks. But in terms of the probabilistic analysis, we've got a weak temperature, above normal temperature outlook for the next 6 to 10 days. Not much of a signal, but there is one there that covers most of the state except for the southwest corner. In the precipitation end, again, not a real strong signal. We got a weak above normal signal in the northwest part of the state and a moderate I can't say the word signal in the southeast. And then we've got a weak signal covering most of the rest of the state for precipitation. And then there's a neutral zone in the not quite the northwest corner, but close to it. Go ahead. Going out to the 8 to 14 day, much different looking signals. Again, any cold that we're expecting is going to be in the next several days. So that should weaken as the signal as the outlook moves forward in time. But we've got a fairly moderate signal for above normal temperatures covering most of the state. There's a weaker signal in the northwest part of the state, and we're just touched in the southeast by what I would call a strong signal for above normal temperatures. Looking to the 8 to 14 day precipitation outlook, we're right in the sweet spot between above and below normal. In the northwest, they're calling for a weak above normal outlook, and in the east, they're calling for a weak below normal outlook. The middle part of the state, going north to south, they're really not showing much. There's really no signal there at all. So equal chances of above normal, below normal, or normal precipitation. Go ahead. Taking that outlook and the same premise out to 30 days or out to 90 days, this is the seasonal outlook for pretty much a meteorological winter. And here we're not looking at a strong signal in any direction in terms of temperatures. The southern part of the state is looking at equal chances, above normal, equal chances of above normal, below normal, or normal temperatures. Moving into the north, there's a weak signal for below normal temperatures. Jumping over to the precipitation side, it looks very much like the temperature. The equal chances are for the outlook calls for equal chances of above, below, and normal precipitation. And in the southern half of the state, in the northern half of the state, we have a weak signal for above normal precipitation. So not a lot of signals coming from the teleconnections across, or the atmospheric teleconnections for the winter outlook. Probably somewhere near normal is probably your best bet. And that's what I've got for you, Tony. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony. Well, first we'll do just a little recap here of the U.S. Drought Monitor. Again, as I said before, recent snows in the west led to some improvements over there, and we're seeing continuing precipitation deficits in the east and southeast that have led to some further degradations in that area. Well, as this is how to get involved, there are two ways that people can help report conditions in their area. The first is through the Condition Monitoring Observer Report, or CMOR system. It's always, it's just easier to say CMOR. I can never remember the parts of it. The URL is highlighted on the slide over here, and there have been no additional reports since our last webinar, but that is not surprising given that we're moving into winter. If you're experiencing impacts, dry or wet, you can report them in any of the several categories that you can see across the top here. You can also include photographs with your report. And while these are very helpful and show us or allow us to see what you're seeing, it's even more helpful if you can either include a photo of normal conditions from a similar vantage point, or if you're submitting these on a regular basis, include a photo each time you're doing it from about the same spot, and then we can sort of see a progression of conditions, and that's invaluable. Just my normal caution that any photos that you do upload are publicly viewable, so do keep that in mind. The other way that you can help is to become a CocoRaHS observer. Through that program, you can send in condition reports as well, and those are displayed on the map down here on the lower right. But the original purpose of the network was to learn more about precipitation variability, especially over really short distances. So you can submit actual precipitation amounts, and those are shown on the map up here on the upper right. And to do that, observers are set up with a 4-inch diameter rain gauge, and they submit their precipitation readings online each morning via the form over here on the left. And those will show up on the map. The only requirements are that gauge, an internet connection, and just a love of observing weather. And you can see your points show up on the map, compare with your neighbors, see what's going on in your area, and help contribute to what we're learning. The map here on the left has the observations for today so far, or at least as of 7-8 o'clock this morning when I grabbed it. You can see definite concentrations in areas like Laramie and Cheyenne, but also a lot of open spaces where we could use volunteers. Not that we'll turn down any observer, no matter what the density of observations might already be in that location, but it would really be nice to see some of these, some dots showing up in some of these holes over in here. And those open spaces exist in all networks. Even when you combine data from multiple networks like are shown here, there's still gaps. And this map shows the stations and networks that are contributing to the PRISM data grids that are used to create many of the maps that you saw today. This map here is made up of, shows the makeup of the data for the October 1st products. So if you can help and fill in a gap or know someone who might be able to, you can sign up at the URL down here on the lower right, or you can contact me directly, and my contact is here. And so that concludes today's webinar. I'd like to thank my fellow presenters, Tony Anderson, Aaron Fiaschetti, and Wendy Kelly. And also on theirs, and my behalf, thank you guys for joining us today. So with that, I will turn it over to Wendy, who will take us into question and answer.